Next up is, we are part of the city's Adopt a Trail program in Columbia, and we've adopted a 1/4 mile of the Bear Creek Trail. And our job there is to remove invasive species and litter. And so we do that every last Saturday of the month, beginning at 9:30 unless it's really hot, and we start earlier. And we'll keep that up through September. And there's information on both of these on our website, which is sierraclub.org/Missouri/. But another event that's coming up that we don't have on the website yet is Walk for the Climate. This is something that Mid-Missouri Peaceworks actually is the main organizer of and host, and we generally co-host with them. So if you want to add that to your calendar, that's going to be September 10th in the afternoon. And as we all know, the climate crisis just gets worse by the day, and the evidence more apparent. So I hope it'll be a big turnout this year. Then we will be doing tabling at the Mid-Missouri Pride Fest. Sierra Club is a diverse organization and welcome everyone. And so we'll be there making sure that people are aware of not only our inclusivity, but also our environmental advocacy. And so if you would like to help with tabling, they are running that event 2 days this year, and we have to have people there both days. So we're going to need a lot of volunteers because it runs from noon to 7 p.m. each day. So yes, you don't. It is September 23rd and 24th. And I'll be making available like a sign up genius kind of thing so that you can sign up for shifts. We'll put that on Facebook and Meetup and our website. I'll put it all over the place. Like I said, we're going to need a lot of people. So as and interest, they changed the rules a little bit this year. Generally, like we are trying to help people register to vote or get them to sign up petitions. We walk out into outside of our tent and we say, hey, are you registered to vote? Just to get their attention. We're not allowed to do that this year. There's more chairs in the back, so if you run out, just grab a seat. So welcome everyone. And so really, you'll just be standing inside our space and talk to people who want to talk to us. So, but we've worked at Pride Fest before. It was a really great event for them. There's a lot of young people oftentimes, and many of them have been here. Then there's a city activity coming up, which fits in with the work that we've been doing related to the electric rates. And maybe one of the things that, the mayor gets asked about tonight. The Water and Light Advisory is holding a meeting where they're going to talk about rate affordability. There's going to be like a presentation, a discussion, I really understand it. And that's going to be September 12th at 1 p.m. in the afternoon in City Hall in room 1A and 1B. So if rate affordability is a topic, electric rate affordability, I'm sure maybe water. Did they do both? Just electric, but we'll see. It just says rate affordability. It didn't say there was both. But anyway, that's something if you're interested. I just wanted to share that. And have I missed any announcements? 1 p.m. on September 12th at Hall in 1A and 1B. Okay. Then I just wanted to mention etiquette for tonight. So I'm sure that everyone here is going to behave themselves. But I do want to make sure that everyone understands that we really value Mayor Buffaloe taking the time here tonight. And I want to remind everyone she's only been in office since last April. So she can't solve all the problems in 1 year. And she only has 1 vote on city council. So, and we have a city council city manager form of government. And one of the things that I quickly learned when I got on a city commission was how frustrating it is. Because you have to do everything through the city manager and, like tell staff what to do. So with keeping that all in mind, we'll be doing question and answer. I am recording, so thank you for reminding. True. Yes, we have Nick Foster as well as our mayor. Nick Foster is our city council person for Ward. We appreciate you coming. Appreciate everyone coming. Barbara, and oh wait, to do your introduction. So everybody knows that Barbara is our mayor. In addition to that, she got her bachelor's and master's science degree. She first worked for an extension, and then she joined the city government of Columbia as the sustainability manager, and she did that job from 2010 to 2021. And that's where I first got to work with her as being chair of the climate and environment. And we made a lot of good progress. She got the climate action plan put in place. So we did a lot of good. Then, as I said, she was elected mayor and left the city government, took a break. With that, I'll turn it over. Wait, that's not supposed to say this.
It's funny. I was texted 7 minutes ago asking if I had slides. Counter the email request Peter said that said this is just question and answer. And so I just want to say I don't have a slide presentation, but I'm happy to bring up anything. I did ask. So Columbia City Council has not received yet our Climate and Environment Commission annual report, but it has been to the Climate and Environment Commission. So I do have it if I need to reference it for our 2022 report for looking at that. So I just thought I'd give a little bit of brief overview of some of the from the city council perspective, and also some of my personal hopes and aspirations. And then, hi, other people are there. And then we can just go into the questions. I appreciate the foundation building, Carolyn. That said, I still know it all comes on Nick, and I feel the pressure on our shoulders every day, as do all council members, on trying to do everything for everyone to live, work, learn, and play. A lot of you know my background, sustainability, obviously, architecture was where I first started, wanting to be an architect and then realizing I was a designer. But I was better about influencing my workplace to go think about doing that. Got to work for the city for over a decade, where I learned not just our form of government, but also how long it takes things to happen in bureaucracy. A lot of the best things that happen when working for this city were because we got a huge influx of funding from the federal government. Our energy efficiency and conservation block grant are what got a lot of our sustainability efforts in city facilities done. The water and light department, all the money that they put into their demand side management program and renewable energy is how we got a lot of things done there. It's not just general fund that makes it easy. I used to joke that when I started, I viewed myself as the Colorado River and the city organization as a bureaucracy with the Grand Canyon. And we were slowly eroding away at the way things had always been there to try to create something beautiful and sustainable for everybody to appreciate. Now I'm still trying to do that, but from the diet, which is an interesting perspective to be on. In the last year, I have been happy. So Nick and I are privileged. DeCarlin Seawood as the city manager is a fantastic city manager. DeCarlin, when we speak with DeCarlin about the things that we're hearing from our community members and what we're seeing from other communities, he was like, what can we do about that here? Obviously, a lot of this is the way it's always been. So it's kind of taking that and changing the perspective on where we're going. But I am renewed by some. So in the last year, some of the things that we've done, finally, we have, we're looking really into 100%. This has been something that we've talked about since before we even had the climate action adaptation plan was what's the plan to get to renewable energy? And for the longest time within our municipality, it was always an extra, right? If we have the money we'll look into this. But now while working with the Energy Authority, Water and Light Advisory presentation at their July meeting about the options to have. Now staff is analyzing that and it's coming back to council this fall, we've been told. Some of the other things we've been doing, we've known for years. I worked on this with multiple other cities in the Midwest. We've known that electric vehicles are coming. What are we doing to prepare for it? So now we finally do have multiple grant proposals in for electric charging stations around town, as well as a rebate for installing level 2 charging stations in your home that comes through our electric utility, because we know that's a big piece. And I mentioned the electric vehicles because this is one of the ones where we know as transportation is one of our big parts of greenhouse gas emissions. What can we do to electrify that? At the same time, we're also looking into how do we electrify our homes so that I can get off of fossil fuels for how we keep our homes. At the same knowledge being, I also need to green that electrical grid because otherwise it's just dirty electricity that's then powering our homes and heating our homes. So this is that sort of, for me, it's that delicate balance of how do we phase in these things all together as we step forward and having that long vision, that game. The other big piece that we talk about is our natural environment. So when I think about climate change and the impact it's having on our, for me, it's thinking about what is it that's absorbing the heat as we have hotter summers? What can I do for tree canopy and native plantings around town? And then also at the same time, what can I do to make sure if we have those heavier rain events that we're not normally having in our spring and sometimes in our summer, as we've experienced over the last week, to make sure that we can absorb that storm water and keep it here for us to use. And so I've been happy. I don't know if anyone, I imagine a lot of people in the room participated in the Sustainability Office Show Me Heat program over the last year, where they're looking at actually what our heat island effect looks like, taking measurements, working with science departments in Columbia Public Schools. And then also now working, they've engaged over 100 unique individuals in our community that don't know programs that are helping give advice on what they can see happening in their neighborhood and what can they do to help reduce the heat island effect for them. You guys are all looking behind me, so it makes me like, it's just okay. No, it's okay. It's just, I'm like, is there someone chatting? That I don't. Okay. Hi. Oh, okay. And all of a sudden everyone looked up. So it's just, I mean, it's some of those things we know from my experience, you know, climate change, it impacts every aspect of our life. It's our waste, it's our energy, it's how we get around town, all of those things, which a lot of it falls within So some of the other aspects I think about that I know we talked about during the campaign and have since talked about is how Columbia grows. And this is a sensitive topic because there's some that don't want Columbia to grow. Unfortunately, in order to continue to be a vibrant, sustainable community, we need to have growth. But I really do believe in intentional growth, how we design and plan for our community. We recently had some proposals that came on to council that at the time I had to vote no on when it came in for these annexations, because I didn't think we had a plan in place for how people would get to those homes, or what we were thinking about as far as where would they eat, where would they get coffee, where would they work that was near. And so last December, we did put together and have a resolution with the county on, we're looking at, like for instance, Richland Road, if anyone has driven out on Richland Road before. That's a county road, soon to probably be a city road. And I was like, let's plan for what that looks like. As we're growing, where can people get coffee? Where do the school buses pull over to pick up kids? How can people walk to school, ride their bikes without just being a 2-lane, no shoulder road, as we're about to put 300 new homes on it. And so I think that sort of proactive working in collaboration with our county, with Missouri Department of Transportation and others can help us as we're growing as a community. But the other thing, as somebody who also lives close to downtown, how do I have that balance of my neighborhood's character, but also gentle density, as I've heard it called before? So how do I do, so it's not just, you know, a bunch of, let's say people of a certain age, and I don't mean the age coming into an area and bringing all their individual cars, but also that sort of like inclusionary zone. So we can have people that have the ability to walk to work, to ride their bikes to school, but also at the same time making sure that we're not overwhelming neighbors with the growth that's happening. So these are all things that are obviously top of mind every day. And then there's always the reminder that I'm in one of the hardest working volunteer jobs in the community. We're a council manager form of government. So how do we get this? How do we support our city manager to help implement and plan and communicate for the wishes of the city council? So I've seen a lot of growth in the last year. We've seen improvements in city processing. There's still opportunities for improvement within some of the ways that we do things. And so how do we give that feedback so that we can continue? Those are just some of my highlights at the top level. Just a couple personal professional things. I was recently just elected as the chair of the Environment Commission for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So I'm excited. I'm excited to bring the experience I had both as a city staffer working in this space, as well as a community that values the environment in a state that sometimes does. I think our U.S. Department, our department, but how do I bring those voices to at a national level and then help us advocate at a federal level for what it is that communities need to really focus on those areas? So that was just my last little thing that I was really excited about. And I got a call right before this asking if I wanted to go to this national thing in Dubai. And I was like, "Will you pay my travel?" I was like, "I don't think I can afford Dubai right now, but thank you, appreciate it." Yeah. I haven't responded back yet because I have no, I had a voicemail. So I have not called back to ask if they. Yeah, it's in December though. I don't know what Dubai is like. Right? Okay. I don't know. I like snow. That's what will happen. Yeah.
Oh, talking to Mike, the people. Welcome back. What will it be? Looking for wish list things for that, you know, mayors, but thinking about things that are maybe already good that we have to stop.
Yep. So the U.S. Conference of Mayors has been one of the biggest advocates for both the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, two federal bills that happened that then give money back down to the community. So right now, I'm looking into, I recently did a white paper with the climate cabinet, looking at how can we use some of those funds to help us with our infrastructure investments. We kind of have a bottleneck, even if a new renewable energy plant is coming on, transmission lines are not being built, are not being approved at the same rate. And so for me, it's also looking at that, and the Inflation Reduction Act actually for the first time allow city government to get the 30% tax credit direct pay to us. So it used to be that if I wanted to put solar panels on City Hall, I can't get the 30% because I don't pay taxes as an organization. So I could maybe steal those credits and redeem some from a private or partner. We're now able to do a project and request that 30% from the IRS and get that money back for us. So that was one of the big things the U.S. Conference of Mayors has been advocating on. The other thing is related to water quality. Things like I can't remember what PFAS stands for. And Tiff, do you know? Okay, but you know what I'm talking about. One of the things that we've been advocating for is to not only have those requirements for our water quality, but also advocating at the level of the EPA to have them help with financing it, because we don't control a lot of times those who are the source for what's putting that into our environment and our drinking water. And so helping us with the funds to help advocate for that. I'll say with that, and then partnering with some of my other mayors in the Midwest to find where can we do regional collaborations on Group 5 and then help Group 5. So for instance, if we're looking to electrify our fleet, we just passed last year and a half ago the fleet electrification policy for city vehicles, looking to do more electric vehicles. We know it's going to be a lot cheaper for us to purchase if a bunch of us are purchasing the same vehicles at the same time. So we've been advocating, I've been advocating with the mayor of Iowa City, a few in Kansas. I'm not allowed to say the name of the city because we're in Columbia, Missouri, but in Kansas, to look at what could we do to help our government purchases get on with those things.
Looking at, I know there's some talk, see how to hire.
They hired a year and a half ago, we hired a grant administrator who now works in the finance department, but that is helping. And in fact, some of those electric vehicle charging grants that we're writing, he is helping doing it. I will say that, and I understand in some capacity, there's a hesitation. I mean, how many of you have written and worked on a grant before? How many of you have loved the reporting aspect of a grant before? So there's always been hesitation in some of the departments for going for grants because of that, right? There's that like, oh, we're gonna mess it up, we're gonna get dinged, all those things. Whereas then I've been working with Carlin, and I think he's been advocating for staff, build that into the grant then, right in the capacity building in the grant. In 2010, when the city went for the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant, that's what funded the sustainability office. There's 3 years of that. And the biggest job I had was just to manage the grant. It was just to write the RFPs that we went out for energy efficiency in city facilities. It was to monitor where we spent the money. It was to monitor how we reported the energy savings that we had. So like build it into the grant rather than assume it all has to go. Because more and more of these federal funds actually allow capacity building. They're not just for capital projects. They allow for grant management. So take advantage of that. And so we are seeing more of that. It helps that we ask all the time. What are we doing on this? Did we go for this? I will say it's harder for Columbia to get some of our state grants because we appear to be a well-funded like stormwater utility, water utility, when they're comparing us to some rural, smaller cities and communities, which have a greater need. They don't have the tax base of investing or the utility customers. And so sometimes we don't compete at the same, we don't look as eager for some of the state funds as we do for federal funds, which want to see replication. I will make one comment, and this is kind of related to the U.S. Conference of Mayors one. When I was at the meeting in June, excuse me, for our annual meeting, I heard back from one of the Department of Transportation staff members there that they often are reviewing grants from cities, and they're probably almost the same grant, right? We all have a lot of the same needs, same age of infrastructure, the same underinvestment in their city facilities. And what helps them stand out is like if they remember that community, like there's something about that community, like they remember whether it's the mayor, whether it's a council member, the city, like that helps a lot of times on the staff. So that's why I really do like doing the outreach that I get to do through this. It's how when we did our Department of Transportation fund for Get About, when we got a lot of our non-motorized transportation, talking to the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, he was like, oh yeah, Darwin Hindman went to every single of these meetings, and like his name, you know, they remembered him as the biking mayor. And so when they were looking at canoeing, I was like, I can be the biking mayor, like part two, like let me get all your money as well. And so like I'm trying to see if that works. Our recent project with the Bloomberg Harvard the Civic Leadership Initiative, they said very blatantly, if you lean in, we lean in. And so I was like, that means you'll give me money and I can do projects in my community happily. I will lean in and do all of your calls. So, and yeah. I was gonna say, you said you're not gonna be like 10 today. This like, they shared. Fine. So as you know, I'm not like, I'm a very approachable person. I like to hug. It's just a thing of mine. So every time he comes to town, he always brags about, he's always coming up to Columbia for all these economic development. He always gives me a hug. Now on Twitter, he's a different person. And I don't know who's writing his tweets, but they're not always very positive towards Columbia and myself. But I take the high road and I just continue to put out the good things that happen in our community and supporting of our community and all of its people, regardless of how other people respond to it. I will leave it at that, Ken Mitchell. Yes.
There's a couple of things. First of all, gentle density, that's a great one.
Thank you. Let me expand a little bit. So I heard this. I got to do this thing called the Mayor's Institute of City Design, which is a National Endowment of Arts funded project. And it was started 25 years, 30 years ago by the mayor of Charleston at the time. And he was like, mayors are tasked with such complex problems that I honestly do believe some of it can be solved by design in our built environment. And so they invited me to apply, and I applied with the idea of how do I create intentional infill, like what we're trying to work with now, that is in line with what our community needs for attainable housing, but at the same time is not a smack in the face of what our. And so he used to be with the city of Albuquerque and now works for you, teaches at Berkeley. He said, well, what you really need is gentle density. And I was like, tell me more about it. And so I'm actually, they invited me to continue an additional time where they'll pay some of the past time to work with us to think about how do we then have this conversation in a thoughtful way, rather than everybody coming with like their pitchforks to the meeting of whatever it is we're going to talk about. And the city right now has entered into a contract with H3 Studios out of St. Louis to look into our central city neighborhood with this idea of like, what can we do to preserve our community character, but at the same time, what can we do to also have that sort of gentle density? Yeah, feel it.
I think let's throw something.
Okay.
Two other editors interested in the plan recommendations from about the merge. I don't know where that is. I know I think it's still coming.
Yeah.
But the waste audit has been done.
So we have completed our waste audit. We actually, and Nick can probably even maybe speak better than I because he was at that pre-council. Our second meeting in July, we had them kind of present up to like where are they with the review of our recycling? So for those of you who don't know, MERC stands for the Material Recovery Facility. It's where all of our recycling goes. There's 2 conveyor belts and people at the top that are sorting and recycling. And I say that because not many other people have still a man-woman sorted recycling. And they started to look at, well, what is the future of what sort of materials could be collected and have a saleable market? They also started to look at what is our collection, a little bit of our collection. They didn't get to the curve of the collection, but the actual in our material recovery facility, what is it in the future we should have? I want to say, Nick, one of the recommendations is continuing the idea of the dual stream.
Good.
Okay, I'm back. Nick Foster is going to talk, y'all.
Composting, exactly. But what I was encouraged by in the presentation is there are some things, our community is very motivated to recycle. It's one of the reasons so many are frustrated, not in curbside.
Including your council members.
Including me, my wife. Let's talk about recycling. But one of the positives, most positive things about it is that we have some opportunities in terms of recycling cardboard in particular, where there are $1 million that we might be able to. So it wasn't an immediate report. But there are another concrete.
And say, if anybody wants to see that actual presentation, I believe it was attached to the agenda of the Free Council.
Yep.
The July 19th or 17th, I can't remember. The date I have 17th.
It was July.
Yeah, and that was nice. So we got
One thing I would just add to that as well, when we're talking about recycling and the collections that I honestly do think also long term, we as a community and probably US as a society, we need to talk about like the sort of like closed circle, this closed loop, and that sort of idea of like what to actually do it. Because right now I have so many people that wish cycle. They just, I hope this is recyclable, and they put it in, which then makes the system, when we talk about valuable, when you're talking about what it is you're collecting, what can we actually make from that that's going out? The other aspect that I think about for this, and I'm reminded, and Jay can probably remember this too, in Carolyn, when we were developing the climate action adaptation plan, we know that food waste and like composting is a big piece of what is going into the landfill. When we first talked about doing like curbside compost as part of the CAPS development, collections was like, we can't even like get roll carts at the time. And they're like, how would we pick out compost? But like, what are we gonna do for this? It was in the first draft of the plan was actually, and then there was a big outcry from the roll carts from the plan. But one of the things that have happened since then is we did change the ordinance that do allow for private collection of waste to be allowed for commercial. And so one of the things that I've asked is like, what would that look like to allow that for residential? Like if a private, so right now I don't want to privatize our trash collection and recycling collection, in part because even if we're not in charge of it, we'll still get blamed with it. Might as well stay in charge of it and just figure out how to do a good system. But for compost, because we're not sure how many people would do, at least for entering into it, other communities do have kind of private collectors for compost. And so exploring those ideas or
Yeah. Right? We should be thinking master plan.
yeah.
That's something that would contribute to. But one of the ideas was to wrap the MERP in place so that you start facilitating businesses that cycle.
Yeah. It was funny, 6 or 8 years ago, we were starting to talk about, so glass is one of the hardest things for recycling because it breaks. and then turns into a fine sand and mucks up the systems. And so having glass kind of separate has always been an ideal way to do recycling. We had a company approach us about the idea of could they collect our glass because they wanted to use it for sandblast for paint, different paint applications. And I was like, yes, please come to it. But it was too hard at our existing MRF for them to figure out how to do their. That's what's really appreciative of staff explorers right now. What could the future look like in this, and being wide open in their eyes as far as when they started. Yes.
The State Farm Parkway drop off, just a block off off right school.
Has the purple dumpster for glass only, which is awesome.
So I see on. Which is actually, and fine. Give them all your frustration.
Maybe that's what we should do. For like, hey, like.
Legal will break your glass.
Yeah.
For discussions at both meetings on electric rates, as you well know. I brought a copy of my bill. I'm one of the users in the smallest rate category. I keep my air conditioning at 80. I'm the only one in the household. I turn it off most nights, the dishwasher twice a week, So it's my understanding that the current rate structure has seen the biggest increase for the very smallest residential users and the moderate users. My bill went up $67 this month. It was a little hotter, but remember I keep my air at AC. And I think a lot of it is to do with this recent rate increase in the base charge and the smallest users. I can't go to that water and light advisory meeting talking about affordability in September. So I just want to ask you what you think about the recent proposal to look at the rates and try to relook at it for those smaller users and try to make it more fair.
Yeah, so I did receive the proposal, Carolyn with myself to send it to us. So it passed on the staff for having for them to review. The one thing I will say is that with the current electric rate, what we had coming, I think my biggest question I have is that we talked about small user aside. When we talked about equity, if you look at right now, the Natural Resources Defense Council is advocating in California for different scales of rates for income durability. And so they have the low income fixed charge. It's the idea of their customer charge for customers that are the 60% of the average median income would be $5 a month. And then NRDC has always supported for a volumetric scale, the per kilowatt hour being more, but the base charge being kind of lower. They look for. And then as it goes up, medium income is slightly more, and then higher income is higher. So I've asked for them to review that because right now, Water and Light, besides the September meeting, they've also talked about at their October meeting, they're going to have a public meeting about a low income. I think that's the big. One of the things when council received this, right? So we had been through the year and a half, starting with the IERMP task force, the Integrated Electric Resource Master Planning Task Force. I'm trying to get better about not giving acronyms, but then I'm in a space where y'all probably know the acronym, what it means, and so it's that. We had been through that task force and then also the Water and Light Advisory Board, which, and Nick and I can speak to. I value a lot of my volunteer boards and commissions and the recommendations. Right? I value that they're in those 8-hour meetings, the first one, second, going through that and hearing. So when it comes to us, we always, I was looking at a 2016 memo from then rates analyst at that time. So what I like, which said a cost of service is what we should for our electric, which is what is supposed to cover this. And then we obviously have the person. So I'm taking all of that into consideration when it comes. And we have given feedback to the city manager and department staff. They were like, You know, when I look at other communities, when they do this rate analysis, they do more public before it comes. Right now, you can't vote your Kansas City without knowing that Evergy is considering using time of use rates without seeing a billboard on your way everywhere that they're doing this. And so we have given that feedback, like, what are we gonna do better about this? It was also a surprise to us that there had been no letters sent out before it came to council, just about on what it could be. So we all should have received a letter since then, that shows like what is the plan for going. I do encourage, it is good for me to know that, Alice. So you have that experience, where it did go, like the change that has happened. Because I know from like my own, I look at, in the summer sometimes, because you don't have best of the efficiency of a house just because of age. Sometimes it gets to tier 3. I know that that happens to me. And so I did compare what was going to happen in 22 with what was compared to 23, and mine was projected to be at $10. Now, I have not then checked now to see what did happen in July. And I will say, I had a stay with me, so I'm going to asterisk that with being, it could have been like, I'm going to blame it on them. But I want to use that after, then we can go back. That's better than a lot of it, you know, it's interesting when they're like, oh, based on assumptions. We did have real data in what went into a lot of our pieces. But also at the end of the day, we've been based on assumptions for a long time. We are overdue for having advanced metering infrastructure for our bills. Because when we talk about things like trying to encourage people not to charge their car or turn on their dishwasher at 5 o'clock in the evening, it's going to be a lot easier when we have that, which if you remember, I feel like it was 2008 when that first came to council at the time of this idea. There was a lot of pushback on concerns over what would this do and tinfoiled and hats. And I mean, like, so there was a sort of like, you know, it's like, I make this argument all the time, and Nick's heard it and made it with me, where it's like, we're making decisions also for future councils so that they're not having to make the hard make it a time. So the AMI I know will help a lot. And finally getting that going, but do tell me more of those, and if anyone has other experiences, that helps us make the case, because otherwise a lot of it's on assumptions on what's going to happen. It's a lot easier when I have real data. So sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, the people aren't able to hear, so they might want to repeat the question.
They can only not.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay.
I
It's
think
like,
one
can I
of the
type
cons- My understanding is we make profit. Water might didn't lose money. So, what's the need? Want to tell us we need X amount of dollars for water and lights, future investment on solar panels or X or Y. That would change our outlook plan, but right now we don't understand what's going on. It feels like the bond rating is driving everything. And I think we can come up with creative solutions to solve the bond rating. I haven't seen the city come up with any creative solution. I saw a report from the whatever group that said this is the cost of service, and therefore it should be like this. But we in this room are the owners of the utility, and we make the decisions as the owners, and we, Columbia, has a social justice philosophy, and we have historically not thought about cost of service as the deciding factor in how we charge it. So there may be some criteria that you guys are really, working on that is driving this. But I hope it's not cost of service. And if there is another agenda, if you'll be transparent with us, maybe we will help you solve it instead of pushing back hard, and that's what we're trying to do. I think you understand. So can you share with us what the motivation is? There's motivation.
Yeah, so I think there's multiple questions in there, the ones you were talking. So one of the things that they were doing, at least when they came to us, part of the discussion was about, part of it is not just the bond ratings, which obviously you do have to show, you're doing systematic increase to cover the cost of it. But when we talked about our debt coverage, so how much have we already invested in making sure there's standards, like just financial standards they have to meet. And I bring this up because I'm not actually like the debt is not my main area of expertise, but you're obviously you want to have your debt coverage ratio to be like a 1-to-1 type ratio. And so in 2022, it was 0.79, which was showing us that we were below where we were supposed to be as far as we're having good fiscal standing. And I look into these things because when I think about the things that we have and I do kind of go back to cost of service, because part of that is how I think about a lot of our utilities. If I want to provide something, I want to make sure that I'm covering the income that I'm getting from it. And so as I'm looking for them to do more renewable energy and decarbonizing of our electric utility, I want to make sure we're investing. And so when they said it's 0.79, which includes a lot of the payments that come in through this, when we talk about that, that then affects our purchase power and our ability to do that. And so purchase of power. Yep, yeah. And so that's then why we had the second piece, which you guys have agreed, like supported, when we were talking about the fuel cost adjustment, which is where when all of a sudden we have a lot higher cost of purchase, we're allowed to get a little bit of that dollars back on it. And then the other piece was the minimum reserve. They've usually capped it at 20%, which is kind of standard operating procedure for most of us. And then the third one was they do want to have a positive net income, not a huge like profit, but they want to have a positive net income so that if they do have those are the three things they led into the conversation with council. I can understand though, just like I talked about, best practice for when this conversation is a lot louder than when it's happening in a once a month advisory board meeting and then with us in a pre-council session. So that was where a lot of it came from. Like skipping ahead on what I have here. When we did look at the other piece for me was looking at the customer charge, right? So that idea that it's supposed to cover, as I describe it, like the poles and the wires and the people that do the billing. I did ask, what are we doing to make sure that those costs are lower, right? Like that we're being as efficient as we can with that. And I looked at what do other communities do for that. So for me, when I was joking, Alice, when I looked at my utility bill from last year and this year, I also then looked at my utility bill as if I lived in Burlington, Vermont, Austin Energy, and Fort Collins, Colorado. So there are 3 municipally owned electric utilities that I admire because they also do a lot for renewable energy. I looked at how I would have compared in their communities based on how they do their cost, some of their additional pieces, and it was around the same cost in Austin. They're also in a different grid, not on the MISO grid. They're not on the same kind of grid that we're on. They get a little bit cleaner of one where they are. Burlington, Vermont, though, it was more expensive for me on their bill because of what they do. Basically, theirs is for your piece about the kilowatt hours. Theirs is 100, under 100, and then just over 100. Whew! Like when I looked at that one, I was like, oh, that one's a bit different. So I understand that for pieces of it, a lot of it is help me justify more. And I realized that we were getting more because we were asking the questions more frequently. And it's hard for me to have that balance of like, how do I share this? Because it's not what's the best avenue for sharing this information and for going about it. So I do think for sure, yes, more information can be going. But I appreciate also getting these questions so I can ask them and I can understand better what to do. I do want to push one thing that when we got the proposal, and I already mentioned this to Carolyn, proposal talks about our demand side management programs, our renewable energy. I was like, that's not necessarily in the rate ordinance, right? And so that's where I'm kind of like, that's where I want to see, and I've asked, what are we doing to increase our demand side management program? Like, what's the percentage that our goal is for going up on this? because that's where I want to see more of this investment and what we're doing. It's just an aside, not necessarily related to the customer charge. But that was one thing that I was really wanting to know more about, which I think they also. Oh, well, it doesn't matter because they can't hear anyway. It asked me about their coverage. I don't know on that one because I didn't write down all the numbers that they gave me, but I will look into it.
Actually,
Oh, you would not. It's required. Yeah.
They did.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing I'll also add, when I was looking at those other communities for what they do, right? What is their base? I do know that some of them obviously have a lower customer charge, in part because that's just how that city is. Like it's a lot more dense in some of the places. But one of the things that they both for I think all three of those utilities have is that they do have the additional charges that are for their demand side management program. Which I think is that sort of idea of like knowing how much is actually going to go to these, and one of them called them, I don't know if they called them social justice, but you know what I mean? It basically called it out, which is that kind of showing, yes, we care about this. This is the thing that is important to us, and we will invest in it, and everybody's helping pay for this to help protect all community members. I'm not necessarily proposing this at that time, but I thought that was, when you talked about what is it that we signal, that was the sort of thing where I was like, that's one way to base it. And you kind of want to be like, aren't y'all expert? Like, pick one. You guys are yeah. website. Yeah.
Where he grants for it, I'm looking.
So,
Those are just
yeah, so I can repeat. Do you want to, do I need to repeat? Okay, so repeating question, first question was like kind of how to figure out your own personal carbon footprint, especially in regards to our power supply, so what percentage yours coming from. And the second question was about, I'll give you the name, it's microgrid. This idea of microgrids and what could we do, whether or not there's grants out there, or what can we do for this? And I'll say, both things are actually in the climate action adaptation plan. They talk about your personal carbon footprint. One of the things that it's looking at is both where do you live, and then it asks you questions related to, so they can figure out then your life. So these I will find the link that I wanted to send to you and send it to Carolyn to share on that sort of calculation. I will say the one thing, there's two calculators out there. Carbon footprint. One looks at also consumption, which we do not measure consumption as far as like where does the stuff go that you bought? What is the carbon footprint of that being produced in like Seattle and then shipped to you? So that is one level scope that we do not include in our greenhouse gas emissions, including food. On the personal calculator, you can put in some estimates to kind of see what your consumption carbon footprint also relates to that. But I will say on the second one, microgrids are also one of the things that are proposed in the climate action adaptation plan, but I have not seen any movement on that. We did have, it was 5 years ago, a local developer that was building near Battle High School was proposing to do regional geothermal, because there's some things that make more sense if you have a large enough campus for things to kind of help that cost of infrastructure, the first cost of infrastructure. At the time, they needed a lot more subsidies to do it. The city didn't have at that time, but I think that's another thing to get to, is how do you incentivize that sort of regional geothermal or regional group buys. I will say, and we expect to come to us sometime this fall, we're finally seeing a community solar proposal from Water and Light, which they've been talking about for over a decade. And so this would allow, if you can't do solar panels on your house, because it's like, so, case that you can't do solar panels on your house, shade, location, whatever it is, you could buy into how to grow power that's created and generated by it. So that should be coming to us and hopefully be available for customers to buy into January of 2020. So that's great, but I told, so it has not come to council yet, but that is.
Put it in your, yeah, put it in your.
How much money does the city of Columbia lose if a person installs their own solar system? They're no longer paying utility bill. Is that figured into your rate increases?
Probably, yeah. So the customer, so the one thing is, like, in case something happens to the panel, you still have to legally be attached to the grid, and also that you have to have that thing in. So there's some things that the base charge is supposed to just pay for, regardless of whether or not you demand. You actually take down any of them. Because in case you do need electronics, something happens to your solar panel. I don't know the cost of what we're losing. I don't know if today,
Remember the value.
the value. Yeah.
Yeah, so in the last IRP, they might. To help figure that out, what does it really cost the city to have solar versus, like people like me who invested in it, we sell it. So if we have extra. And unfortunately, that study was felt to be inadequate. So the water and line advisory board to, basically told the county study not what can't. Unfortunately, need to do it again. And I heard that the state of Missouri was actually doing a value of silver study, and somebody just got fired because that didn't get done on time. It must be a complicated problem to figure out. He came to see if he could help us with.
Do you know why this microphone might not be working?
What's going on?
Well, it works here in the room, but the people on the Zoom can't hear.
Oh, the microphones that we have on our request are just for audio in the room. I can try and go grab a microphone for the Zoom, but you're gonna have to stand next to the mic that plugs into the
Oh.
computer. It's
So they can't hear.
Can they hear you?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's so the level is. Okay, well, maybe we requested the wrong thing on setup this time, so. And all right, thank you so much.
Um, so things that I got, so for solar on home. 2.4 megawatts of distributed solar within our territory, and then from 2020 to 2023, there was 2.68. So that holds. And so I think there's one of the things that we've been talking about is I was like, I can't ask people to like do more. But when we have more, but I'll figure out also to spend more with it. How much you can do? Yeah, let's see. Yeah.
We have great dates right now.
Yeah.
Until the end of the year.
Yeah.
I actually had a guy come out. Look at it. It's a good deal. He said after 1 year, you don't pay anything, basically. Hour.
Yeah.
You can pay off your foot. Done. Yeah. All the rest.
Jay might know more. He was on one and I direct for Yeah.
Come up with a whole host of things, and we have a lot of things that I really keep out of, and the consultant to provide us with cost of service. I want to explain just that the value of solar can be compared just to simply how much does it cost to generate energy, whether it's gas or, and compare those two generating. That's essentially what happened. What was the unfortunate part, because of all the task forces, all the paper and all, is that the consultant said we could include environmental and social benefits if asked. And it was well into the study when all of a sudden questions came up. Why aren't we including that? And they said, well, nobody asked. And so because of that, we ended up with a value of solar that is just completely erroneous. And I think that if you look at the value of solar, it's not simply the environmental and social, but if you actually look at, if like, say, you were interested in solar and you borrowed money from the utility at the rates that they offer, that the money that they would make on those, on the interest for that loan would more than compensate the margin that they would have made for all the electricity they were supposed to if they bought it from the grid. And so what I think is the huge benefit is that the utility could continually offer customers that incentive through like a good rate for the loan and make sure that they're making margins they need. And roll over every 5 years because you have to get some more solar panels 25 years down the road. So manufacturing. So utility could be in that game if they want, you know, and they could actually become, some utilities become installed. But I digress. I want to. On. Well, they are. For, I don't know, how many years, but.
So we're already doing.
Yeah, so we're already doing, but it's basically upping the scale, right? So years ago, you know, the utility was trying to do a certain percentage. Trying to meet that certain percentage of our total grid, and it could be, if you have those goals, it becomes a lot easier to report on them for what to do. Some other utilities in other cities have done also the idea of group buys to bring down the cost. So like Cedar Rapids and Iowa City have partnered together with their utility to then use their buying power to purchase solar panels and then provide them at that lower cost to their customers. So that's one of the things that, you know, I've been asking is like, well, what could we do on this, especially taking advantage of this idea of the group buy? So that then you can do, and they partner, there's groups that work on this specifically to work with cities. It's funny, it's actually sometimes easier to do it in a non-municipal electric utility environment because the city is the one kind of advocating. I used to joke, I would go to different conferences and people are like, you're so lucky. You have a municipal electric utility. You can get so many sustainability things done. And I said, no, it just means the people telling me no are just in the same building. And I like, it's hard to sometimes do this because you see them in the elevator, right? And you're like, okay, we're like that. And they're like, you know, as opposed to being an advocate really strong because you want to be a good coworker. So that is something that obviously we can advocate for, and it helps that you have a council right now that is all very supportive of these sort of initiatives. And whether or not it's because they're trying to do for cost savings for the customers, climate change, or also just like freedom of energy. Like there's a lot of that sort of support for what can we do for locally generated electricity. And so when we talk about those conversations around greening our grid, and I mentioned at the beginning, you know, transmission line hurdles with us actually connecting to some of the new power plants, renewable energy, wind farms, whatever it is, that sort of thing, whatever we can do locally is that much better because we already have our grid here locally to then deliver and distribute that renewable energy. So those are things that obviously we're supportive of.
I wanted to just make one, actually, this is a question and kind of goes with what you had asked earlier in terms of how do I know how much carbon that I'm producing. One of the things that was proposed during the climate action plan development was the idea of putting a little statement on the utility bill, how much carbon dioxide was emitted because of your bill. And that got poo-pooed by the group, so it didn't make it into the plan. But I would propose this to the mayor tonight. Do you think that's an idea that we could look into for the city to add to our utility bill?
And I think, so the question was, I'll come closer to the microphone now. So the question was, could it be able to show kind of like the carbon impact on your utility bill of your use kind of for that piece? And I know that they're getting ready to look at who is it that does our bill. For the longest time, we were told we couldn't add things to the bill. Some of it was because of Freedom of Information Act and all kinds of things on like what we couldn't put on the bill. We were trying for the longest time to also show how did you compare to your neighbors. I don't remember if you remember that, Jay, we actually like had a proposal in place. We were going to sign on the dotted line with this group that would like help put in, but because it was a third party, actually, Dan, I think you were on EEC when we had this. There was a third party because our information was going through the third party. The law department was like, no, because then they own your whatever. But I think we are exploring with our new system, with the new records management system, or who does our the Tyler reporting on what we can put on the bill. So I'll ask on that one. It's also the sort of thing because we have the online dashboard. I cannot stress enough how awesome seeing your utility bills on the online system are. If you have not registered on it, it's so much better than the paper or PDF bill that you get. It has much better charts for exploring how you're doing, as well as a little bit more information about how you compare. But just like with when we talk about advertising, I don't know how many people actually know about that, right? I don't know, that the website is actually a lot better. Your Keith's like, it's like a way better system to look at for your utility bills to see it. I joked at Monday's council meeting that we're all busy, and I get that, right? I get sometimes because people are like, why aren't you telling us about the Como Wild Yards program? And I was like, we've been doing it for 7 years. But we're all busy. And so like, unless I came to your house and knocked on it, I get it. But this is one of the things that we've been pushing on for our staff. We want to support them, but we also want them to do a better job at communicating, especially when it's a good thing that we're doing, like get that word out better, faster.
There may be a grant for it.
There might be, yeah.
I'll look.
Thank you.
Other questions? Let's go back to, oh wait, no, you're right. So I'm gonna go back to Jessica.
This is a bit of a change from all the energy stuff, but I know that, Boone County is doing their comprehensive plan for the first time since the 90s. I was happy to hear you mention the survey, which is online now. So it would be great to get more input from that. But I was wondering if you saw any opportunities, just in what could come out of comprehensive planning for the county.
Yeah, so the question was about the county doing their comprehensive plan and their update to it. So one of the fantastic things about it is that they're actually asking for our input. So they didn't do that the last time. And also I've sat down with one-on-one meetings with their consultant that's doing it, as well as DeCarlin serves on the steering committee for it. Excuse me. And one of the things that's really, that I'm appreciative of coming out of it is that the commission right now, the county commission, is very open to this idea of how they can plan for their regional growth within the community. One of the things that I stressed to them was thinking about regional transportation. Columbia, obviously, we are struggling with we're still 11 drivers short within our own transit system, which is why we had to combine routes on last Tuesday. Hopefully not for very long, but we're in the process of doing our transit study for Columbia. But I've asked for them to look at it. What could we look at as far as a regional transit authority, or whether or not is how do we plan regional transportation as a county? So that was one of the main feedbacks that I gave to their group. The other one is also just regional energy generation. They recently, 5 years ago, passed a really restrictive rules about land use for wind energy generation, which I encourage them to revisit just as we think about our community, as well as like what other sort of things can they do to incentivize or encourage solar farms and other sort of regional generation on this. I asked years ago a colleague in the Netherlands, how did they get people out of their cars, right? And think about regional transportation by bike, transit, and walking. And they're like, well, first off, we have nowhere else to go because we're built out. Like a lot of these places, they're built out. But a big thing that they talked about was planning for it. And so as we're talking about this next 10-year plan, 20-year plan for the county, how can we plan regional trails that are used as transportation? Right now, when we're looking at our Colt Railroad, as we're thinking about the section of it that comes from near our power plant into downtown, we already have it in a potential plan. Eventually, maybe that would be a regional trail. But to me, I would think about like, if we can either do light rail or trail, like what can we do for these options? But the other thing is when I think about a lot of people that work in the city of Columbia live in the regional, some of our different towns, Sturgeon, Centralia, Harrisburg, and others. What can we do to then build out transportation, like trails and systems that go to connect people? Because that's what you're seeing, like Fort Collins. A lot of people that work for the city of Fort Collins do not live in Fort Collins. In part, it's because of, never mind, not the name that they use here. I was going to say, they've had a lot of people retire there, which has brought up their cost of housing a lot. But so a lot of their staff don't live there, but they have the opportunity to ride their bikes into work on regional trails that bring them in. So I think about that when I'm talking with the county about how they develop and how they grow and how do we plan for that growth.
Can I give the URL for that? The master plan survey
Oh, yes.
is at ourboon.com.
Ourboon.com is where the regional survey is for the master plan for Boone County. I don't know if this is helping that I'm repeating things.
I think it is. 'Cause,
Okay.
That is picking up.
Okay.
So I also wanted to, before we go on, I wanted to add that Sierra Club has actually met with the Boone County the team that's doing using this. Sierra Club has met with the Boone County team that is, working on the master plan and gave input. We have a committee that's formed to review whatever comes out of the process and provide more input. So if anyone would like to be on that committee, you could just contact me or our Gmail, sc.minmo.group Gmail. And sorry, we wanted to share that. We have provided input. We'll be definitely providing more. I encourage all of you to take the survey as individuals and repeat any of these kind of themes that we're talking about tonight. I haven't looked at it yet, so I don't know what the questions are. We lobbied to get a climate question in there so that the commissioners would feel they had the support of the whole county, not just Columbia, to take climate action. So, please, take that survey. All right, next question. You had one.
Into the whole transportation
Did you hear?
Yeah.
area, and aren't there any community, people from the community, regular citizens on that board to help make decisions about our community?
Okay, so the question is, how does CATSO figure into the discussion we're having, and are there community members that serve? So CATSO stands for the Columbia Area Transportation Study Organization. It is a requirement in order to get federal funds for transit opportunity projects from Missouri Department of Transportation, the County of Boone, and the City of Columbia, that they have to be in the approved plans. So nothing goes on to CATSO unless it's comes from the city, the county, or Missouri Department of Transportation. The one thing I will say is that I view the way that we get pieces on that is from like the city, right? So like when I'm talking about, for instance, about planning for the Richland Road corridor, and thinking about how this community grows up there. The reason why that gets onto the CATSO Long Range Transportation Plan, which fun fact has a new name because of the federal government changing it. Do you remember what it is, Nick? Metropolitan Plan Update. I feel like they just changed it at a federal level just to mess with us because I just got what LRTP meant. Of course. And so the way that it gets on there is actually from us advocating for it, which is from your elected officials and from the staff. And so any of those things that come on, the example that I'll give of what CATSO serves as is similar. It's a metropolitan planning organization. So if you're familiar with the MARC in Kansas City, the MARC is a metropolitan planning organization. So it's a requirement, it's a quasi-governmental organization that is then put together for uniting those different kind of transit authorities or different groups for their planning for it. I'll be honest, I think it'd be better to advocate at your city level or your county level, as well as a MoDOT, to have them put those initiatives in. Because it's almost like performative, sort of like, yes, as these things come through. I have been happy in the last 2 years where we have seen, so I serve on CAT, so I sit next to DeCarlin and he's the one who chairs it now, like he has to be the gavel man. But one of the things that we have done is we've asked them to add different measurements, especially to the city projects. What is it? What's the climate impact of this? Or what are we looking at for a transportation reduction on this? Most recently, the conversation that happened was related to the Gans Creek, the realigning of it based on like where they saw the transportation going. So I will say, while they have that plan on there, they will not, no city, no county, and no MoDOT would be able to do a project development unless they have to go through their different environmental reviews, as well as other different, especially related to habitat and I just blanked on the word I'm about to say. The distressed waterways is not what I'm thinking of, but it's What? Yeah, the water, the impacts there. So they would not be able to do anything while they've talked about a different alignment unless they had to do all those things, because the current studies that are in place from that are old enough that they would have to be redone. At the time it was done, it did not show an impact if there was a road that went there, but there's been a lot of development since then. There's been a lot of changes in our geography. So they would have to review that again.
Okay, somebody else.
There is one question in
Let the Zoom people ask the question.
from the Zoom, the question is actually to the audience.
Can you?
Is anybody in the audience who falls into the tier 3 usage category willing to share their view of the rate being higher for tier 3? Do they view that as being unfair? If anyone is willing to share their opinion.
Who asked the question?
Someone else.
Christie.
I think I hit tier 3 once. Because we have solar on our house, so I'm okay with tier 3 costing more, personally. You know, I believe that, you know, the more you pay, the more you use, the more you should pay, and the more expensive it should get. So that's the only way to promote conservation.
Yeah, I'll share.
I agree with that. I will just say.
Yeah, I'll share. So Christine, I'll share with you with mine. I did look, in part, so we drive an electric car. And so I do charge at home. And so we do in our house, family of 4, just gonna say, we don't have central air, but we do have mini split systems, which I love. It's like on demand cooling me. But we did not have air conditioning until I was pregnant with my son, 10 months pregnant. And I gotta say, it was the best decision ever when 10 months pregnant. No, I'm just kidding. It felt like 10 months. It was not. It was like 8 months at that time. But I did see, and so when I was looking at mine, yes, obviously, because I do believe. So when I look at for tier 3, when I hit tier 3, it was charging me, you know, at that time, 13.97 cents. Looking at that, my tier 3 usage was pretty close to my tier 1 usage, and was the same cost at that time because my tier 1 had a little bit more than my tier 2. So yes, happy to pay more and happy to continue to charge more for 3 over 1.
All right, who else?
It was more-
That was a
yeah.
good question. Oh, yeah, sure. You were up, had your hand up. a while. That's okay.
Is Columbia doing anything in regards to hydrogen power of either vehicles or generators to produce power? Has they looked at that at all? Because it's kind of the up and coming thing.
Yeah. So the question is whether or not Columbia has looked into hydrogen power, and I will say, I don't know. As we're looking at as far as for our usage, I will tell you that I know that the university is investigating it and researching the different impacts of it and the potential it has for our region. I have looked at some other communities that are talking about it, and I have been approached by this. It is the sort of thing that this is kind of like why I like my advisory boards and commissions, where I'm like, other people tell me what this, you know, what our opportunities are here for that. So, and
Then we probably should give her a break. Alice has already asked, because there's someone more. One of the things I love about the Sierra Club is the emphasis on environmental justice, and I know the electric rate proposal is part of that. But I'm curious to know for Columbia, what are the other priorities that you have in terms of environmental justice? What kinds of things could we be thinking about and helping with?
Yeah. So one of the big things right now, if you're looking at some of our like Justice 40, the different projects that are coming out of Department of Energy, which are looking that you're focusing on some of your projects, those areas that do benefit those who have been underrepresented, underserved. So as we're looking at our, what do they call it, EEZ, like the different sections that we have within our community where we can also get additional funds. I mentioned earlier the Show Me Heat program. So the Show Me Heat program, Office of Sustainability has been doing to talk about our urban heat island effect and the effects that it has on our most underserved. And some of the things that are coming out of those proposals are suggestions for us to do more energy efficiency projects, and especially rental housing and single family houses where they haven't had the finances to make those improvements. We mentioned the loans and the rebates that we have within the utility, but that's just one piece. While we've expanded that, like we are working right now with the Columbia Housing Authority to add solar panels and energy efficiency improvements in a lot of their projects. what can we do for those who are not in Columbia Housing Authority and not already working with water and light on their existing? One of the other big projects that we know that we've been working on for years is rental energy efficiency. We have forever, right? I was like, it's like when we were on EEC together. Alex.
Now we're making progress.
Yeah, yeah, so we did have, a survey go out and they're working right now with somebody to help propose what would those policies look at. Ideally for me, I look at some of the other cities that have done this. And the successful ones where they have the least amount of pushback to start is that they have things like right now with our federal funds coming in that we help incentivize energy efficiency through, we offer loans or we offer grants, incentives, rebates, all of those things for properties to make the improvements because you have a deadline of when the stick comes, right? So right now you offer the carrot. So it's not the best place to give the suggestion for because of their cost of living, but the city of Boulder did in 2012 do a program where they were looking at, look, if we offer all of this money to bring down the cost of rental energy efficiency improvements, we will help give these grants, we'll get these things done, because in 10 years, we're going to require that you're performing at this level. As they were becoming closer to the 10-year mark, all of a sudden, then a lot more people were interested because they would not get a rental compliance certificate anymore. So that is one of the ones that we're seeing, and we've been incentivizing. Water and Light has offered basically double rebates for insulation programs that were for property owners who have income qualified or they accepted housing choice vouchers. So we do know that there's there's already been uptake in that, but it's that threatening of the stick that we see potential additional improvements for. So those are just some of the ones that because energy is a big piece of it when we're talking about environmental justice. The other thing is kind of what Jay mentioned, when we talk about the social cost of carbon and that sort of the cost of things, it has been historically hard for most communities to actually talk about the triple bottom line or the social cost of carbon. So how do you measure those? Because not everybody has the same kind of calculator of the benefits and the offsets that they have. 2 years ago, we're piloting the TBL, triple bottom line tool on reviewing processes that the city was looking at. They've used it on a few, but I have not seen it come back to us for as far as like, this is the way that we'll do it. But honestly, looking at a true equity tool to measure decisions before they're made is one way to really approach that. But
yeah, last I heard that was getting replaced by including certain budget questions in the budgeting process.
yeah, that's not as exciting. But
Yeah, no, it's
yeah,
not.
yeah.
It was progress.
It was progress,
In the
yeah.
budget now, they have to answer certain, questions related.
I will say to one highlight too, is that this is now the second year that we have the cap in every section of the budget, the climate action adaptation plan.
That is a great achievement.
It's a huge achievement. Like, I mean,
For
before.
3 years, my 3 years on the Climate Action Commission, I kept harping on that.
Yeah.
I'm
So it's
thrilled.
finally, it's been in and everyone, now I will say, I let it go the first year that I was like, okay, that's not really an impact, but bless your heart.
I
Some of
was
them,
really weak.
and this is now the second year where I feel a little bit more like, okay. And opportunity for
The first year, one of them was like, look, make less copies.
it is true. And the first department is actually a big deal. When I see all the paper that comes from, never mind, I'm not going to mention the department, but there are some opportunities for improvement. But some of it is also just some simple things like how do you encourage working from home as a policy, because it does help down on transportation. If you look at some point in time, check out the Como Climate Action.org. The website has the dashboard for the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan implementation. And on it, you'll see the impact that transportation has on our local emissions when you look at 2020. Yeah. Because you see when no one was driving, the major drop that we had, and a big part of that was associated with transportation. To that note, and back to the calculator conversation, the biggest thing that also has been a hurdle for measuring has been getting access to data. And 3 years ago, I finally got a partnership with Google where they provided us transportation emissions data, because we've been harboring that for the longest time, the way that communities measure their transportation emissions was by 1 day counts that the Missouri Department of Transportation does And then extrapolating how would that impact if it were daily? And so we knew that Google's tracking all of us at the same, anyway. And so we advocated at a national level, and Google started then providing transportation data, which is more realistic because it's real data. Yeah, so that's cool.
And before we go on, I wanted to mention, related to this question of Sierra Club announcement. So, I was at the Water and Light Advisory Board meeting today, and one of the things we've done in the past, at Sierra Club is volunteer with the Central Missouri Community Action to go door knocking to tell people about the weatherization opportunity for low-income households. And that's, really helpful because, as Barbara said, we're all busy. We don't read all the stuff that comes at us, and people just don't know. And I think that's one of the situations with our many energy efficiency programs, even some of them specifically for low income housing. Because one of the things that was apparent when we started looking at the data that they did have available for the electric rate discussion is that there are some low income households, well, let's just say financially assisted households. I don't really know for sure they're low income, but financially assisted households that are using huge amounts of electricity. And so, we can speculate they have, ancient, HVAC system, they have terrible insulation, whatever. But one of the things that I volunteered with Director Sorrell is that if he was willing, we would organize another door knocking campaign with Sierra Club volunteers to go knock on the doors of those homes or residences or whatever they are and tell people about the energy efficiency opportunities available to them, just to make sure that people know that, that they have this opportunity. Because a lot of people, when we did it for CMCA, Jan went with me, a lot of people didn't know about it. So, and some people wanted to do it twice, which no, you can't do that. But so I just wanted to say, if anyone's interested in that, I'm pretty sure that we'll be having something. And so please watch your newsletters, Facebook, Meetup, etc. for that opportunity. So. And Nick, did you want to add on to anything Barbara said?
I was just going to encourage people to look. Ron showed me that I looked it up on Google, it showed me that Columbia, Missouri. If you will look at issues related to justice, I think it's very revealing about that. And it's a robust website. I'd encourage you to take a look.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. So look up Show Me the Heat, Columbia, Missouri, to see a lot of what sustainability has been doing to look at the urban heat and related to environmental justice. And as I mentioned before, they're doing then focus groups now with especially some of the communities that have traditionally not been involved in city processes to then come up with action plans related to their neighbors, their neighborhood to help facilitate that conversation. So.
Well, I think I'll go ahead and close it. That's a good place to close it on environmental justice. So I appreciate it. If everybody give a round of applause for well, thank everyone for coming tonight. We don't have to, run right out the door. Library's open till 9, I believe, but they will be making announcements soon. And we will try and have another meeting. I think we're going to try for next month on either the second Wednesday or the third Wednesday. So, be on the lookout for that. And Jay, did you want to say that? Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's not involving Barbara, just the Sierra Club. And I just want to say that I got an email from, I'm on the email list. I got an email about solar, and sun power.
Oh, right, that's Sun Power email.
That they're, I guess, marketing sun power. And, I really feel that, there's local solar companies. There's like a dozen or so that are listed at the Water and Lights website. And I really feel that, people should recognize the value of like participating with local companies as opposed to some national company if you're interested in solar. And so, I think that the local companies that are listed in the utility will help get the rebates and so forth. And they're also going to be here in case anything goes wrong. So there's a lot of reasons, and I just kind of feel that like it should be more than just solar. Sierra Club has a solar offer for you, and
right,
recognize that.
Just for everyone on the Zoom, Jay's talking about the National sent out an email about their partnership with solar, Sun Solar, I think it is. Anyway, you might have gotten it. It's a national email about a solar opportunity where you get like an extra rebate. And Jay's saying that, we have a lot of good solar providers here that we should use, which I agree with. Sun Power was the one on the email. And I agree with that. I do want to say that one of the reasons we don't have like a local partnership is because
Sierra Club is as big a bureaucracy, and I don't care if that's reported. That was the city government, so. But it is a major undertaking to get a partnership agreement with a third-party vendor like a solar provider. So that's one reason we don't have one, so. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming, and please stay tuned.
So much for sharing your time. This is a big interest from.
Oh, yeah.
For us.
And also.